The pain in my chest burned like a live flame, and my own son never once looked up from the screen. My name is Hortensia. I'm 68 years old, and for decades I ran massive warehouse inventories. But that night, I realized I had raised a stranger. He thought I was invisible. He was about to learn that whoever pays the orchestra picks the music. I've always prided myself on being a tough woman, the kind that doesn't bend in the first wind. I worked 35 years as head of a warehouse for an industrial hardware distributor. My hands spotted with age now, the skin thinner than it used to be, know what it's like to audit thousands of shipping manifests, bark orders at stubborn truckers, and make sure every last screw was in its place. I'm not one of those fairy tale grandmothers who knits baby sweaters by the fire. I'm Hortensia, the one who lost her husband young and built a 2-story house while raising a son on discipline in cold early mornings. But old age has a sneaky way of arriving. It creeps in like dampness in the walls. At first, it's just a small stain you ignore until one day you realize the foundation is compromised. That night, the dampness wasn't a metaphor. It was pouring over the city, one of those lightning storms that shake the windows and turn the streets into rivers of mud. I was in the kitchen trying to make something warm because I felt a strange cold that didn't come from the weather. It came from deep inside my bones. On the wall right beside the fridge hung an old barometer of wood and brass that belonged to my father. The needle was on storm. It wasn't wrong. Then the pain hit. Not some small ache you rub away with alcohol. It felt like a giant freezing hand grabbed my heart and squeezed without mercy. The air got stuck in my throat. My left arm went numb instantly, like it wasn't even mine anymore. I dropped the cup in my hand. It shattered against the ceramic floor, but I barely heard it over the ringing in my ears. I grabbed the counter, gasping, breaking out in a cold sweat. I knew what this was. I'd watched my husband go the same way. This was a warning, a red light flashing on the dashboard of my body. Rogelio! I tried to shout, but my voice came out as a hoarse whisper. Rogelio. My son. My only son. He lives in the back part of the house. 5 years ago, when he married Vanessa and they had the baby, I fixed up the annex for them. Gave them privacy, gave them a roof. And why deny it, gave them way too comfortable a life. He's 40 years old, but sometimes I swear he never stopped being 15. He works by projects, as he says, which means he spends a lot of time at the computer and very little time bringing money into the house. I pay the electricity, the water, the high-speed internet he insists he needs, and the private health insurance for his whole family. The platinum plan, the most expensive one, so my grandson and them would be protected. I walked as best I could, dragging my feet across the covered patio that connects the main house to the annex. The rain slammed against the tin roof with deafening violence. Every step was a titanic effort. I felt like my chest was about to explode. I opened the door to their living room without knocking. It was dark, lit only by the blue glow of a giant 60-inch television I also paid for last Christmas. Rogelio was sprawled on the couch, feet on the coffee table, surrounded by fast food wrappers. Vanessa wasn't there, probably at her mother's with the kids since it was Friday. Rogelio, I said louder this time, gripping the door frame so I wouldn't fall. He didn't even turn his head. Hypnotized by some show about dragons and swords, the volume was deafening. Wait, Mom. This is the best part. They're gonna kill the king. That distracted voice he always used when I asked him to fix a leak or take out the trash. Son, I feel sick, I insisted, and the pain forced out a groan that finally got his attention, at least as an annoyance. Rogelio paused the show, letting out a long, heavy sigh, like I was the biggest burden in the world for interrupting his entertainment. He turned slowly, eyes half closed. What is it now, Mom? His tone was a mix of disbelief and irritation. If this is about the argument this morning over the electric bill, I already told you I'll see if I can give you something next week. I gasped, pressing my hand to my chest. It's not that. I'm hurting here, my arm, I can't feel it. I need to go to the emergency room. Take me to the hospital, please. Rogelio looked me up and down. He didn't see his mother suffering. He didn't see the woman who paid for the college he never finished. The woman who bought him his first car. He saw an interruption, a nuisance on a rainy night when he was comfortable and dry. He looked at the window where lightning lit up the flooded yard. "Aw, Mom, come on. Look how hard it's raining. It's probably just gas. You ate that pork stew at noon. You know it sits heavy." He picked up the remote again. "I'm not going out in this downpour so a doctor can tell you it's indigestion. Besides, I'm watching the season finale. I can't just leave it." "Rogelio, I feel like I'm dying." I whispered it, and the tears came. Fear tears. He let out a dry little laugh, not even looking at me. "You're so dramatic, old woman. Always imagining the worst. Go on back to your kitchen, make yourself a strong chamomile tea, and lie down. You'll see, a tea and a hot water bottle, it'll pass. Tomorrow, if you're still bad, I'll take you, but right now, no." And he pressed play. The dragons roared back to life on the screen, drowning out my sobs. I stood there, frozen. Not from the cold, from disbelief. "Have some tea." Those words echoed in my head louder than thunder. My own son, the man I nursed through every fever, the boy whose scraped knees I cleaned, the grown man I still supported like a king at 40 years old. He was leaving me to my fate because he didn't want to get wet, because he didn't want to pause his show. The physical pain was unbearable. But what I felt in my soul that moment was a mortal wound. The brutal confirmation of a suspicion I'd been sweeping under the rug for years. I raised an egotist, and worse, I was funding his ego. I turned around. I didn't beg. My pride, the same pride that let me lead 30 men in that warehouse when no one believed a woman could be the boss, rose up through the fog of the heart attack. I made it back to my kitchen step by step, feeling like every heartbeat could be my last. I found my phone with shaking hands and dialed 911. "I need an ambulance. Possible heart attack. Woman 68. I'm alone. The door's open." I gave my address with the precision of someone who has dictated shipping coordinates her whole life. I sat down at the wooden dining chair facing the barometer that still said storm. As I waited, the fear of death began to mix with absolute mental clarity. I looked around the house. This big house full of ferns I watered with love. Full of memories. On the table lay the insurance envelope that had arrived that morning, Premium Family Plan. A massive sum auto-debited from my savings account every month. It covered Rogelio, Vanessa, and the boy. Dental, vision, hospital stays in the best private clinics. I paid for that. I paid for everything. And what did I get in return? "Have some tea." The siren approached, cutting through the rain. The paramedics came in soaked boots, muddy, but with a gentleness my son never had. They took my blood pressure, put me on oxygen, spoke to me like I mattered. "Ma'am, your blood pressure is through the roof, and the EKG shows an abnormality. We have to take you in, now." Then Rogelio appeared at the patio door, sleepy and annoyed, probably woken by the red lights flashing across the street. "What's going on? Why all the noise?" He looked at the paramedics like intruders. "Your mother is having a cardiac event, sir. Are you coming with us?" Rogelio looked at me, pale, oxygen mask strapped on, strapped to the gurney. For 1 second I saw doubt in his eyes, maybe a flash of guilt. But it was quickly replaced by laziness. He looked at the rain, at the ambulance, at his slippers. "My car is blocked in by some boxes in the garage," he mumbled, fishing for cheap excuses. "Mom, is it necessary to go like this? I could take you first thing tomorrow." I pulled the mask away for a second, my eyes locked on his. There was no plea in my gaze anymore. There was ice. "Don't worry, son," I said, and my voice came out surprisingly steady for a woman on the edge of collapse. "Go back to your show. Don't get wet." "But who's going to go with you?" he asked, more worried about himself than me. "I'll go alone," I said, and I gestured for the paramedic to take me out of there. The ambulance ride was rough through the potholes and the storm. But inside my head, the chaos was being organized. While the heart monitor went beep, 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 my logistics brain went to work. I started doing a mental inventory. Not of boxes or tools, of my life. 1 house fully paid, bought with my own labor. 2 decent pension and a lifetime of savings. 3 adult son functional, capable of working, currently parasitizing my resources. 4-0 emotional or physical reciprocity. The result of that inventory was a massive deficit. I was in the red emotionally. I'd been investing in a company that paid no dividends, only losses. At the hospital, the public one, because in my days I didn't bother with the private insurance card, and honestly I didn't care they saw me fast. Stabilized me. It turned out to be severe angina. A serious warning that my heart was tired of carrying weight that wasn't mine. I spent the night in an observation room surrounded by green curtains and the smell of disinfectant. Rogelio never showed up. He texted me at 2 in the morning. Let me know what they say. I couldn't go because Vanessa felt a little dizzy and I didn't want to leave her alone with the kid. Rest. I read the message and turned off my phone. I didn't feel sadness. What I felt was relief. Like when you finally throw out those old boxes you've been keeping just in case, and you realize how much space you have now. The next morning, the doctor came on rounds. Rest, stress, dietary changes. I could be discharged by noon if I kept improving. Ma'am, you have to take care of yourself. Stress is a silent killer. I know, doctor. I smiled a little. Trust me, I'm going to eliminate the main source of my stress today. The moment he left, I borrowed a phone charger from the nurse, booted up my phone, and called my insurance agent. It was Saturday, but Alfredo always answered. He'd handled my policies for 20 years. Hortensia, something happened. His voice was worried. I'm fine, Alfredo. Just making some adjustments in my life. I kept my voice calm like someone who knows exactly what she's doing. I need you to cancel the family health policy for Rogelio. All of it. Silence on the line. The one for all three, Rogelio, Vanessa, and the boy. Yes. But Hortensia, that policy is excellent. Full coverage. If you cancel it and they want to get it back later, they'll lose seniority. It'll cost them a fortune. I know, Alfredo. Cancel it. Effective immediately. Don't renew it next month. And any refund for unused days goes to my account, not theirs. If you're sure, do you want me to notify them? No, I cut him off. Don't say a word. The system will send them a letter in a few days or an email Rogelio probably won't read because he never checks his inbox unless it's about video games. Leave it. All right, Hortensia. First thing Monday, I'll process the paperwork, but I'll take them off the system today. I hung up and felt like I could breathe better than I had with the oxygen the night before. Then I opened my banking app, canceled the automatic payments for the annex's fiber optic internet, canceled the streaming subscriptions. I looked out the hospital window. The storm had passed. The sun was trying to push through the gray clouds. I felt physically weak, yes, but inside I felt the roar of an engine restarting after years of being shut off. For years, I thought loving my son meant making life easy for him, keeping the stones out of his path. I was wrong. I'd turned him into an emotional cripple. And worse, I'd taught him that my well-being came second to his comfort. Have some tea, he said. Well, my boy, I hope you enjoy your tea, because the banquet is over. They released me at 3 in the afternoon. I called a taxi. I didn't call Rogelio to pick me up. When the cab pulled up in front of my house, Rogelio's car wasn't there. They'd probably gone out to eat, to a movie, enjoying themselves since Grandma was safely handled at the hospital. I walked into my house. The silence was delicious. I went to the kitchen, picked up the pieces of the broken cup still on the floor, and threw them away carefully. Then I made myself that chamomile tea he'd recommended. I sat in my favorite chair looking at the garden. The barometer now read changeable. I smiled. I didn't know when or how, but the blow would come. Rogelio was a hypochondriac for himself and his family. He didn't care about me, but any sneeze from the kids sent them to the most expensive pediatrician in town. Vanessa got migraines and got MRIs like candy, all on my card. I sipped my tea. Warm. Comforting. My phone buzzed. Rogelio. Mom, you home? We couldn't come get you. Things came up. I'll come by later. I didn't reply. I set the phone down. The first domino had already fallen when I called the insurance company. Now I just had to sit back and watch the rest of the pieces collapse one by one. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't going to lift a finger to stop it. The real storm was just beginning. But this time it wasn't falling on my roof. Sunday dawned with that deceptive calm that precedes a big inventory shift at the warehouse. I got up early. Not because my body wanted to. My chest still ached, and a deep tiredness lived in my bones. Now my mind had been working all night, sorting, labeling, and discarding emotions like defective merchandise. I made myself a strong black coffee, none of that chamomile tea my son had prescribed with such contempt. While the smell of roasted beans filled the kitchen, I pulled an old metal cookie tin out of my closet. That's where I keep the important documents. I hadn't opened it in years, confident everything was flowing like a calm river. But calm rivers hide treacherous currents underneath. I sat at the dining table, pushed aside the embroidered tablecloth to make room. It was time for a full audit. For 35 years, not a single nut moved at the distributor without me knowing. I could tell you how many boxes of half-inch screws were missing just by glancing at a shelf. But in my own house, under my own roof, I'd allowed a monumental embezzlement. I started pulling out the papers. Bank statements, utility bills, insurance policies, credit card receipts. Smoothing each page with my palm, I started adding. No calculator. My brain still has a speed with numbers that many young people lack. The first figure that hit me was the grocery bill. 3 overflowing carts a month. I eat like a bird. Toast, soup, some fruit. Rogelio, Vanessa, and the kid ate like an army on campaign. Prime steaks, imported cheese, foreign cereal brands, craft beer. It all went on my debit card under the excuse of, "Mom, since you're going to the store anyway, grab us a few things." Those few things added up to nearly half my pension. Then the utilities. The electric bill last month was obscene. Of course it was. 3 air conditioners running day and night in the annex, high-performance computers that never turn off, lights on in empty rooms, me who turns off even the TV standby light to save power, subsidizing their energy waste. And then the health insurance. I stared at that paper a long time before I tore it into small pieces. The biggest expense of all. A monthly fortune so they could walk into clinics that served coffee in porcelain cups while I had to crawl into a public ambulance alone because my son didn't want to miss the season finale. The total amount I spent maintaining my son and his family dwarfed what I spent on myself. An unsustainable operating loss. In business, when a product line loses more than it earns you, delist it. Simple. But what I found at the bottom of the tin was what really straightened my spine. Under the policies and receipts was a blue folder faded with time. I opened it, and the smell of old paper brought back memories of my husband. A cautious man. He didn't leave a fortune, but he left everything in order. It was the deed to the house, property of Hortensia, sole owner. Next to it, a document I'd drawn up myself and made Rogelio sign 5 years ago when they moved into the annex temporarily while they saved for their own apartment. A loan for use agreement. A lease of the property with clear clauses proportional payment of utilities, maintenance of the area, and a term of 1 year renewable. Rogelio signed it, laughing. "Aw, Mom, why so formal? It's not like you're my landlord." He never paid a cent. We never renewed the paper. But his signature was there, scrawled in that careless handwriting of someone who believes the world owes him everything. I ran my fingers over that signature. Legally, they weren't tenants. They had no rights beyond what I allowed. I held absolute power over every brick, every cable, every drop of water on this property. I got up and walked to the hallway mirror. The woman looking back at me had dark circles and gray hair that was a little messy, but she no longer wore that beaten dog expression from Friday night. For years, I'd convinced myself my value came from being useful, the endless provider. I thought if I stopped giving, they would stop loving me. What a joke. They didn't love me for what I gave. They tolerated me for what they got. I'd mistaken love for parasitic dependence. I made a second coffee. As I drank it, I heard noises from the annex. Almost 11 in the morning. They were waking up. I could picture it, Rogelio stretching, Vanessa grabbing her phone, the boy asking for breakfast, the usual routine. They expected Grandma to show up with a tray of sweetbread, or to invite them over for a Sunday roast. This time, Grandma's kitchen was closed for inventory. I left the papers on the table deliberately exposed, even though Rogelio rarely entered the main dining room unless it was for food. I went to my bedroom and got a new notebook from the nightstand drawer. A hardcover black one, the kind I used at the warehouse to log personnel incidents. I opened the first page and wrote in capital letters, "Restructuring Plan." I wasn't going to shout. I wasn't going to make a scene. Shouts get carried away by the wind, and arguments only raise your blood pressure, something my cardiologist strictly forbade. No, I was going to act like the warehouse manager I always was: cold, strategic, relentless execution. Step 1, cut the cash flow. Already started with the insurance and digital services. Step 2, recover assets: the food, the cleaning supplies, my time. Step 3, tacit eviction notice. Make life so uncomfortable they'd want to leave. At noon, the kitchen door swung open. Vanessa walked in, wearing her silk pajamas, hair in a high ponytail. She didn't even say hello. She went straight to the refrigerator. "Hortensia, did you not buy almond milk? Rogelio wants his cereal, and I can't find the box." I watched her from the table, taking a slow sip of my coffee. "Good morning, Vanessa. I also woke up well, thanks for asking." She pulled her head out of the fridge, a little thrown by my tone, but not enough to catch the sarcasm. "Oh, yeah, hi. So, the milk—" "There is none," I said. "And there won't be. No more milk, no more special cereal, and pantry service has been discontinued." Vanessa frowned like I'd spoken Mandarin. She closed the fridge door. "What do you mean there's none? You always shop on Saturdays. Rogelio's going to be in a bad mood if he doesn't get what he likes for breakfast." "Then tell Rogelio he has 2 working legs and a car in the garage. The supermarket is 5 minutes away, and remind him to use his own card because mine is out of service for outside expenses." Vanessa stood in the middle of the kitchen, blinking. The first no she'd received in 5 years. She looked like a robot with its cables cut. "Are you upset about the ambulance thing?" She lowered her voice, putting on that victim tone she did so well. "Hortensia, honestly, Rogelio was really tired, and I was feeling dizzy. It wasn't out of malice." "I'm not angry, Vanessa." A lie. Or maybe not. It wasn't anger anymore. It was resolve. "I'm retired, and retirement means I'm also retiring from being your housekeeper and your personal bank." She let out a nervous laugh. "Oh, the things you say. Well, I'll see what's in our pantry." She turned and shuffled away. "Though I think there's only saltines left." She didn't believe me. She thought it was an old lady's tantrum, a passing fit that would fade the moment I wanted to see my grandson. Poor fool. Half an hour later, Rogelio came in, scratching his belly under a band t-shirt from college, bad mood written all over his face. "Mom, seriously no breakfast?" he demanded from the doorway. "Vanessa says you're being weird." I looked at him. My son. 40 years old, starting to bald with the emotional maturity of a 13-year-old. I remembered the pain in my chest Friday night. His indifference. The TV volume going up while I was dying. "There's breakfast for whoever makes it, Rogelio." I pointed at the stove. "I already ate." He snorted and dropped into a chair across from me. He saw the papers on the table but didn't pay attention. Papers were boring things that Mom handled. "Hey, changing the subject, the internet is terrible. The signal keeps dropping since last night. I couldn't finish downloading an important work file. Did you call the company?" I felt a dark pulse of satisfaction in my stomach. "No, I didn't call." "Well, call them. You're the account holder. Tell them to send a technician urgently. I need the bandwidth. I can't work like this." "I'm not calling Rogelio." I closed my black notebook with a dry snap. "And the signal isn't failing. I canceled the business fiber optic plan this morning on the app." The silence was absolute. Rogelio stared at me like I'd grown a second head. "What? Why would you do that?" "Because it costs $80 a month, and I only use the internet for WhatsApp and looking up recipes on YouTube. A basic cell plan is plenty for me. I'm not paying for an industrial connection so you can download games and stream 4K shows while I sit there sipping chamomile tea so I don't bother anyone." His face went from shock to rage, red just like when he was a kid, and I wouldn't buy him a toy at the store. "But I need it. It's my work tool." He slammed the table with his fist. My coffee cup vibrated. In another time, that slam would have scared me. It would have sent me running to fix his problem so my baby boy wouldn't suffer. But not today. Today I saw that gesture for what it was, An attempt at intimidation from a weak man. I stood up slowly. I'm shorter than him, but in that moment I felt enormous. I leaned on the table with both hands and leaned toward him. Then pay for it, Rogelio. The contract is in my name, but the house has the wiring. Go to the company office tomorrow, sign a contract in your name, with your credit card, and pay for your NASA-grade fiber yourself. I don't have money right now, Mom. You know I'm waiting on a client payment. You've been waiting on that mystery client for 5 years. My voice was ice. Meanwhile, my pension keeps draining into your whims. It's over, son. The Hortensia scholarship closed Friday night when I got into that ambulance by myself in the rain. Rogelio opened his mouth to argue, but something in my eyes stopped him. Maybe he saw the Hortensia who fired drunk truckers. The Hortensia who negotiated with ruthless suppliers. For the first time in a long time, he didn't see his doting mother. He saw the owner of the house. He stood up so fast the chair fell backward. Are you crazy? It's the pills from the hospital. They're messing with your head. It'll pass. I'll tether to my phone data, but you better fix this by tomorrow. He stormed out, slamming the door so hard the china cabinet rattled. I stood there listening to his heavy footsteps fade toward the annex. My heart was beating a little fast, but not from anxiety. From the adrenaline of battle. I looked at the barometer on the wall. The needle was moving. Slowly. The pressure was changing. I picked up my black notebook and a red pen. I crossed internet off the expense list. I felt powerful. Not that loud power of shouting orders. The silent power of the person who holds the keys to the supply chain. They thought I was old and harmless, a piece of furniture that signed checks. They didn't know I was the structure holding up their entire fantasy world. And I'd just started pulling out the load-bearing beams. I made myself another coffee. I'd never felt more clear-headed. Rogelio thought the internet was the worst thing that would happen to him today. He had no idea that tomorrow, when he tried to take the kid to the dentist, or when he wanted to see a doctor about that chronic back pain he always complains about, he'd meet the real surprise. The health insurance was canceled, and I wouldn't be there to whip out the emergency credit card. I looked out the window at the backyard. The grass was overgrown. Rogelio had promised to mow it 2 weeks ago. He hadn't. I picked up my phone and called Don Anselmo, a reliable gardener from the neighborhood who charges a fair price. Don Anselmo, this is Hortensia. Yes, I need you to come by tomorrow morning. I want the whole garden cleaned. Prune the roses and haul away all the junk in the back patio. Yes, including those old computer boxes sitting there. No, don't worry about my son. He won't have a say. This is my house and I want it to look beautiful. I hung up and smiled. I was going to spend my money on flowers, on soil, on life, not on parasites. I sat back down with my notebook. I wrote the next task. Something I'd put off out of fear of loneliness, but loneliness now felt like a far more loyal companion than my own blood. I needed to change the lock on the door connecting the main house to the annex patio. That door had always been open for them to wander in and steal food or ask for things. Starting tomorrow, that door would have a key. If they wanted to see me, they could ring the front bell, like regular visitors. The afternoon sun came through the window, lighting up the dust motes dancing in the air. I felt light. I'd spent years carrying a grown man on my back and only now realized I could just put him down. Rogelio was going to fall, and the fall would be hard. But maybe, just maybe, that fall would make him the man I never forced him to become. And if not, well, at least I'd have a beautiful garden and my accounts in order. I heard a strangled yell from the annex. Probably Rogelio just ran out of mobile data. I drank my coffee slowly, savoring epic. The war had begun. And I had all the ammunition. Monday arrived with the metallic sound of a drill biting into wood. A sharp, decisive noise. The start of my new administration. 8 in the morning. Normally at this hour, I'd already be cooking breakfast for 3 people, counting eggs to see if I needed to run to the store. Today, my only concern was supervising the locksmith. I'd called Cardenas an old acquaintance who did maintenance at the distributor years ago. A man of few words and grease-stained hands, Just the way I like my workers, efficient and discreet. You want a double deadbolt, Doña Hortensia? He wiped sweat off his forehead with a dirty rag. Double Cardenas. Make sure that door doesn't open, even if someone pushes it with a truck. I stood with my arms crossed, watching him seal the door that connected my kitchen to the annex hallway. That door had been the umbilical cord. The way Rogelio and Vanessa entered my house, at any hour raiding my refrigerator, using my washing machine, invading my peace. No more. When Cardenas finished, he handed me 3 sets of shiny new silver keys. They felt heavy in my hand, but it was a good weight. The weight of recovered control. I paid him cash, added a generous tip, and locked the door from my side. The click echoed through the empty kitchen like a verdict. I made my coffee and sat down to wait. It didn't take long. At 9:30, I heard the first attempt. The doorknob turned. Stuck. Then turned again with more insistence. Mom. Rogelio's voice muffled through the solid wood. Mom, the door is stuck. Open up. I need to get water from the filter. Ours tastes weird. I stayed silent, drinking my coffee, watching the steam rise from the cup. Mom? He hit the door with an open palm. You there! The stupid thing jammed. I stood up slowly, walked to the door, didn't open it. I spoke through the wood voice, clear and projected like when I gave instructions on the loading dock. It's not jammed, Rogelio. It's locked. Silence on the other side. One of those silences full of genuine confusion. Locked, how, why, we're out of purified water, and Vanessa wants to make coffee. Open up, please. I have the key, son, and it's staying closed. If you want water, go buy a jug at the corner store. $5. What are you talking about? This is ridiculous. His voice went up, mixing shock with that irritation he got when things didn't go his way. I have to walk all the way around the block just to enter my own mother's house. Exactly. You have keys to the front gate. If you want to visit me, ring the bell like decent people. But the food pantry is closed. I heard him grumble something unintelligible and stomp away. I smiled. First skirmish of the day. I knew more were coming. Rogelio was like those sneaky suppliers who, when you reject defective merchandise, first act offended, then try to slip it through another entrance. The rest of the morning I dedicated to myself. I played old boleros that Vanessa found depressing, but that reminded me of an era when music had words and meaning. I made myself cheese quesadillas with real Oaxaca cheese, the good kind that stretches, and ate them alone at the dining table. No TikTok videos blasting at full volume while my daughter-in-law ate food I'd cooked. Around 11, Don Anselmo arrived. An older man with sun-leathered skin and a worn straw hat. Morning, boss lady. What are we doing to the garden today? We went out back. The grass was so tall it reached my knees in places, but the worst part wasn't the weeds. It was Rogelio's storage. Broken plastic crates. An old computer monitor he was going to repair someday, a rusty exercise bike Vanessa used twice, piles of tangled cables, all of it stacked against the wall, breeding mosquitoes. Don Anselmo, I want a total cleanup, I said, pointing at the disaster. Cut the grass, prune the roses, and most important, everything that's not a plant or dirt goes out. Everything, Doña Hortensia. He looked doubtfully at the boxes. What about the young man's things? Everything. I took out $100 and put it in his hand. If he wanted that stuff, it would be stored in his home, not dumped in my yard. Hire a pickup truck if you need to. But I want this patio clear before sunset. Don Anselmo nodded and got to work. The sound of the machete cutting brush and boxes being dragged away was music to my ears. Half an hour later, the annex door burst open. Rogelio came storming out, still in pajamas, even though it was almost noon. Hey, what are you doing? He shouted at Don Anselmo, who was loading the old monitor onto a wheelbarrow. Put that down, those are my spare parts. I came out of the kitchen, wiping my hands on my apron, and planted myself between my son and the gardener. Good morning, Rogelio. Mom, have you lost your mind? He jabbed a finger at the gardener. You're telling him to throw away my stuff. That monitor has a motherboard worth money, and those boxes have cables I need. They've been sitting out there for 3 years through rain and sun. I looked at the pile of junk. If they were so valuable, they wouldn't be serving as a cockroach nursery. Donna Anselmo is cleaning my property. It's my house, too. He was red rage. No, Rogelio. You're wrong. I took a step forward, making him step back. My voice dropped a tone, turning harder. This is my house. You live in the annex because I allow it, and the contract which I reviewed yesterday clearly states the occupants must keep the area clean and sanitary. You've violated that clause since the first month. Rogelio's mouth hung open. He'd never heard me speak in legal terms. If you want to save your junk, you have 10 minutes to move it inside your annex. But I'm warning you, if I see one single box back in my garden, I'll burn it myself. He looked at the boxes, at his crammed annex, back at me with a mix of hatred and shock. You're unbelievable. You almost died Friday, and now you think you own the world. He spat the words. I almost died, yes. And that taught me life is too short to live surrounded by garbage. Hurry up, son. You've got 8 minutes left. He spun around, cursing under his breath, and started dragging the wet, filthy boxes into his living room. Vanessa appeared at the door, horrified, watching him haul that mess into her space. Rogelio, what are you doing? That stuff stinks of rot. Tell my mother that. He yelled back, sweating and panting. I turned and went back inside, poured another coffee. Watching them fight over their own junk gave me a strange satisfaction. It wasn't cruelty, I told myself. It was education. A lesson I should have given 20 years ago. The afternoon passed in tense calm. From my window, I watched the garden recover its shape. Without the garbage, the space looked enormous. Don Anselmo did magnificent work. When he left, the smell of wet earth and fresh-cut grass filled the house, purifying the stale air. But I knew the real blow was yet to come. The lock and the cleanup were just distractions. The true time bomb sat in Rogelio's wallet, a blue plastic card he believed was all-powerful. Tuesday morning, the trap sprung itself. Rogelio has always had a delicate back. Or so he claims. The reality is, he spends 12 hours sitting in an overpriced gamer chair with terrible posture, eating junk food, doing zero exercise. Around 10, my phone rang. Him. I let it ring twice before answering. What's up, Mom? His voice was whiny, full of pain. I'm stuck. Can't move. I think it's a hernia or a pinched nerve. It hurts so bad. I remembered my chest pain. I remembered the rain. I remembered his indifference. That's too bad, son, I said, keeping my voice neutral. What are you going to do? I need to see a doctor, Mom. I can't take it. Vanessa's going to drive me, but I need you to watch the kid for a couple hours. We can't bring him into the hospital with all those germs. There it was. The service request. The automatic assumption that Grandma was always available. I'm sorry, Rogelio. I can't. A lie. I was sitting in my chair reading a magazine. I'm going out today. I have errands downtown. What? Panic mixed into the pain. But, Mom, it's an emergency. I can barely walk. Then leave right now. Take the kid or drop him with your mother-in-law. I'm not available. You're so selfish, he yelled and hung up. I smiled at the dark screen. Selfish. The parasite's favorite word when the host stops feeding. I peeked through the curtain. I watched Vanessa, looking annoyed, help Rogelio into the car. He walked, hunched over, hand on his lower back, making exaggerated pain faces. They buckled the kid into the back seat. The car started and pulled away. I knew exactly where they were going. San Rafael Clinic, the priciest private hospital in town. Marble floors, rooms like hotel suites, doctors who charge in the triple digits. Rogelio loved going there. He loved feeling important, flashing his platinum insurance card, having the nurses call him Sir. I sat down to wait. Time crawled. I pictured the scene, them walking into the lobby, Rogelio groaning a little louder so they'd be seen fast, Vanessa pulling out the insurance card with that arrogance she wears like perfume. The receptionist, polite but efficient, sliding the card through the terminal. Then the error. Card declined. Policy inactive. I could almost taste the moment. 2 hours passed. I'd watered my indoor plants and was organizing the kitchen drawers when I heard a car screech to a halt in front of the house. They didn't pull into the garage. They parked in the street, blocking the driveway. Doors slammed. Frantic, furious footsteps on the walkway. The doorbell rang. Insistently. Over and over. Ding dong, ding dong, ding dong. I walked slowly to the front door. No rush. I adjusted my hair in the entry mirror. Took a breath. Opened. There they were. Rogelio still hunched in pain, but his face crimson with fury, leaning on Vanessa, who looked ready to explode. The kid wasn't with them. Probably left in the car with a tablet. "What did you do?" Rogelio yelled before I could say hello. His voice echoed down the street. "Good afternoon to you too," I said, leaning against the doorframe. "Don't play dumb." Vanessa's eyes were wide. "We got to the clinic. Rogelio was in agony, and when we gave them the card, they said it was canceled." "Canceled, Hortensia?" Rogelio wailed. "The humiliation. People in the waiting room, the girl said, 'Sir, your coverage was voided Saturday, either non-payment or voluntary cancellation by the policyholder.' We had to leave. We didn't have the $200 they wanted just for an emergency consult." I looked at them both. Sweaty, disheveled, humiliated, the picture of helplessness. "Oh yes." I said it like I was talking about the weather. "I forgot to mention that detail. I canceled the family policy Saturday morning." "You what?" Rogelio straightened up a little, momentarily forgetting his back pain. "But you pay it. You always pay it. It's our insurance. The kid has no coverage now." "Correction," I raised a finger. "It was my insurance which I paid for you. And since Friday night, I learned that in your expert medical opinion, emergencies are cured with chamomile tea and lying down. I decided you don't need such expensive coverage." Rogelio went pale. His mouth opened and closed a few times, like a fish on dry land. "This is revenge," he whispered, incredulous. "For Friday, Mom, it was a TV show. It was raining. This is your family's health?" "It's not revenge, Rogelio. It's financial logic." I used the same tone I'd once used to explain to managers why we couldn't afford new machinery. "If my heart attack was worth a cup of tea and a refusal, then your back pain is worth exactly the same. I'm not paying thousands of dollars a month to protect people who wouldn't lift a finger to protect me." "But the kid," Vanessa reached for her strongest card. "You left your own grandson unprotected. The boy has parents." I looked her straight in the eyes, and she flinched at the coldness there. "Two young, healthy parents, fully capable of working. It's your responsibility to insure him. If you're so worried, I suggest you find jobs today. Public insurance is free, or you can buy private, but it comes out of your pockets, not mine." "It hurts, Mom." Rogelio bent over again. "Seriously, I need a doctor. Pay for this one visit, just this one. We'll figure it out after. I promise I'll pay you back." I crossed my arms. The old Hortensia would have run for her purse. She would have felt guilty. But the new Hortensia remembered the loneliness of that ambulance. "I recommend the General Hospital," I said, pointing south. "It's public. They have good doctors. You'll wait 4 or 5 hours on a plastic chair and probably no air conditioning, but they'll see you." "I'm not going to a poor people's hospital," he roared, his middle-class pride wounded. "Then go home," I smiled. "Make yourself a strong chamomile tea, a hot water bottle, lie down." I repeated his exact words syllable by syllable, savoring the irony. "You'll see, it'll pass." Rogelio looked at me with pure, distilled hatred. But behind that hatred, I saw something else. Fear. For the first time in his life, he realized the safety net was gone. He was falling into the void, and no one was going to catch him. "I will never forgive you for this," he hissed, turning away with difficulty. "The feeling is mutual, son," I murmured. But he didn't hear me. Vanessa shot me one last look of contempt and helped her husband down the steps. They got in the car and tore off, probably heading to the pharmacy to buy generic painkillers with whatever cash they had. I closed the front door, leaned against the cool wood, and shut my eyes for a moment. My heart beat hard, but steady. No pain. I felt incredibly light. I'd cut the biggest cash flow. I'd taken away the private health privilege they'd never earned. Now they knew I was serious. I walked to the kitchen. The afternoon sun streamed through the window, catching the new keys hanging on the hook. "Phase 2 complete," I said to the empty room. But as I poured a glass of water, my eyes landed on the calendar. Tomorrow was Wednesday, pension day. And also, I remembered with a sharp smile the day I used to transfer money to Vanessa's credit card, that extension she used for her personal spending. I grabbed the red marker from the table. I marked the date with a big X. They thought the back pain was bad. They had no idea what it felt like when your credit gets cut off in the middle of a department store. The anatomy lesson was over. Tomorrow, basic economics class begins, and I plan to be a very strict teacher. Wednesday arrived with a sharp smell of menthol ointment seeping through the open patio windows. That unmistakable scent of cheap muscle rub from the corner pharmacy, the kind that stains clothes. I smiled while filling the coffee pot. Rogelio had survived his night without private insurance, probably slathered to the ears in that stinking cream because he wouldn't pay for a public hospital consult. Or the wait was too long. I sat in the kitchen with my steaming mug and a slice of toast with peach jam. The morning silence broke with noise from the annex. A dull thud, followed by a muffled curse. "Vanessa, help me up, damn it!" Rogelio's voice was hoarse and miserable. I'm coming, don't yell at me. I slept terribly on that sofa bed, too." Her tone was sour. It seemed the paradise in the annex was showing its first structural cracks. Without my money as a buffer, their life together was turning rough. Two stones rubbing together with no oil. Mid-morning, I saw Vanessa cross the patio toward the street gate. She walked in a hurry, heels clicking hard on the tiles. Designer sunglasses. That fake designer bag, though, she swore it was authentic, hanging on her shoulder. Dressed up. Too dressed up for a random Wednesday. I tapped the kitchen window glass to get her attention. She stopped, turned, and looked at me with disdain, sliding her glasses down her nose. "Going somewhere, Vanessa?" I asked through the few centimeters I'd opened the window. "To the mall, Hortensia." Her voice carried that arrogance she used whenever she felt the ground shifting. "I need to distract myself. The atmosphere at home is suffocating with Rogelio's moaning. Besides," she smiled, "today is the 20th. The 20th. Right. The day her additional credit card, the one linked to my main account, renewed its spending limit. She thought that, despite the insurance and internet cancellations, I wouldn't dare touch her pocket money. She thought my anger had limits. "Have fun," I said simply and closed the window. I didn't warn her. I didn't tell her that silver plastic card in her wallet now had the same value as a used playing card. I wanted her to discover it herself. I wanted her to feel in her own flesh the public shame. That hollow feeling in your stomach when the world says no. A cruel lesson, maybe, but a necessary one. They'd shown no mercy to my heart. I'd show no mercy to their vanity. I went back to my table. I had work to do. I pulled my old Olivetti typewriter out of the closet. I could have used a computer, but there was something final and official about the sound of keys striking paper. Clack. 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 Each letter was a brick in the wall I was building around myself. I typed out a simple but legally binding document, a lease agreement. 3 hours passed. The noon sun beat down on the freshly manicured garden. Rogelio hadn't left his cave, probably bedridden with back pain and wounded pride. Then I heard a car brake hard outside. The front door slammed open. Vanessa stormed in. She didn't go to the annex. She came straight to my front door and started pounding on it with her fists. "Open up! Open this door right now, Hortensia!" she shrieked, voice cracking with hysteria. I took my time. I finished typing the last clause, pulled the page from the roller, and set it on the table. Then I walked slowly to the entrance. I opened the door to a wrecked Vanessa. Her makeup was smeared, eyes red. She didn't look like the society lady she pretended to be. She looked like a child whose candy had been taken. "Can I help you?" I asked, blocking the doorway. "They rejected my card," she flailed her hands. "At the checkout, in the boutique, 3 people behind me. The cashier ran it twice and said, 'Insufficient funds,' then 'card retained.' I had to leave everything there. Hortensia, everything. People looked at me like I was a criminal." "What an embarrassing moment," I said, calmly nodding. "I imagine it was awful." "You did this." She jabbed a shaking finger at me, a perfectly manicured acrylic nail. You canceled the extension. How could you? That's my money for my personal expenses. Correction, Vanessa. I hardened my voice. That's my credit, based on my income and 40 years of banking history. You don't have income. You have an extension by courtesy, and the courtesy ended Friday night. At that moment, Rogelio limped in from the patio, drawn by the shouting. Hunched over, one hand on his waist, the other on the wall. Old t-shirt and pajama pants. What's happening now? Why all the shouting? Your mother canceled my card. Vanessa spun to face him. She left me humiliated at the mall. I couldn't even buy a coffee. Rogelio looked at me, and for the first time I saw real fear in his eyes. Not fear of physical pain, fear of the financial abyss. He realized the tap was completely shut off. Mom. He started trying to soften his tone, though the pain made him hiss. This is too far. The insurance is one thing, but leaving Vanessa without money on the street, that's just evil. We're your family. Come in, I said, stepping aside and gesturing to the dining room. Both of you. We need to talk business. They exchanged confused glances, then entered cautiously. The house was cool and clean, a contrast to the heat and emotional chaos they carried. They sat in the dining chairs facing the table, where a freshly typed page and a black leather folder which I'd taken from my safe that morning waited. I sat at the head of the table, folded my hands and looked at them. For years I'd made myself small so they could feel big. I'd kept quiet about my achievements so Rogelio's failures wouldn't look so bad. I'd swallowed my opinions to avoid offending Vanessa. But the woman sitting there was no longer the agreeable mother. She was the general manager of her own life. Let's lay our cards on the table. My voice was firm and clear. You've lived under the illusion that my resources are infinite and that your access to them is a birthright. You're wrong. I opened the leather folder. Inside were documents they'd never seen. Rogelio, you're 40 years old. Since you were 25, I've subsidized your businesses that never take off, your cars, your vacations, and now your family's lifestyle. I did a quick calculation last night. I pulled out a page covered in handwritten numbers. In the last 15 years, I've given you the equivalent of 2 small houses. Rogelio shifted uncomfortably. Mom, don't start with past accounts. I'll pay you back when— Silence. I slapped the table with my open palm. The sound cracked like a gunshot. Vanessa jumped and shrank in her chair. Rogelio shut his mouth. Friday night, when I thought I was dying, I realized something awful. I didn't just raise an indifferent son. I raised a financial incompetent, and worst of all, I've been using my own money to keep you in a fantasy bubble. You live like rich people on a retired woman's salary. That's over. I slid the typed page across the table. What's this? Rogelio squinted without glasses. A lease agreement, I explained. Starting the 1st of next month, if you want to keep living in the annex, you'll pay rent. The amount is specified there. Market rate. It includes the space and water. Electricity and gas are on you. You'll install your own meters or pay me the exact proportional share. Vanessa grabbed the paper and looked at the figure. Her eyes went huge. You're insane! We can't afford this, she shrieked. I don't work, Rogelio added. Then I suggest you find jobs. My voice was ice. Vanessa, you have a graphic design degree you haven't used in 10 years. Rogelio, you're a systems engineer even if you prefer video games. There's work out there. McDonald's is always hiring if you get too picky. I am not working at McDonald's, Rogelio roared. I'm a professional. A professional who can't afford a doctor's visit or milk for his kid. I was merciless. Pride doesn't fill a refrigerator, son. Rogelio threw the paper down on the table in disgust. I'm not signing that. It's my house. I grew up here. I have rights. No, you don't, I said. Not while I'm breathing. And here came the final blow, the revelation I'd been saving. And speaking of rights, I pulled another document from the folder, a simple copy of a notarial filing I'd started Monday morning right after speaking to the locksmith. I've revoked my previous will. The silence was absolute. You could hear a fly buzzing against the glass. Rogelio and Vanessa sat frozen. The will had been their ultimate life insurance. The guarantee that someday, sooner or later, all of this would be theirs. What What did you do? Rogelio stammered, white as the paper. Before everything passed to you automatically. The house, my savings, the life insurance, the investments, everything. I paused for dramatic effect. Now I've instructed my notary to change the beneficiaries. If something happens to me tomorrow, the house gets sold and the money along with my savings goes into a trust for my grandson's education. Managed by the bank, not by you. You won't see a single cent, not the house, not the car, not the accounts, nothing. Vanessa started crying. Not sad tears, pure panic. She realized her future as a rich widow or even a rich daughter-in-law had evaporated. "Hortensia, please," she sobbed. "You can't do this to us. What are we going to do?" "You're going to grow up." I closed the folder gently. You're going to learn what it costs to earn $1. You're going to learn that if you want luxuries, you work for them. And most of all, you're going to learn that respect isn't something you demand. It's something you earn. I stood up. I felt enormous, powerful. The pain in my chest was completely gone, replaced by a vibrant energy. I had reclaimed control of empire. You have until the end of the month to decide sign the contract and stay under my rules or find somewhere else to live. And fair warning, I've changed the keypad on the electric gate too. Your remotes no longer work. You'll have to open and close it manually until you pay the deposit for new remotes. Rogelio stared at me with a blend of hatred and reluctant admiration. Maybe deep down he recognized the mother who built a home alone. But the hatred was winning for now. "You're a witch," he whispered. "You're going to die alone. When you're really old and need someone to change your diapers, we won't be there." I smiled. A sad smile, but a sure one. "Son, Friday night, I needed you to take me to the hospital, and you chose dragons. I'm already alone. The difference?" I shrugged. "Now I'm alone with money. And with that money, I can hire the best nurse in the world. One who'll treat me well because it's her job. Not because she's waiting for me to die so she can inherit my house." Rogelio had no answer. The truth hit him like a brick to the face. He got up with effort, clutching his back, and walked out without looking at me. Vanessa followed, sniffing, casting one last greedy, frightened look at the black folder on the table. "Oh, and Vanessa," I called before she left. She stopped on the threshold. "Next time you want to go shopping, make sure you have your own funds. Today's shame was free. The next one is going to cost you a lot more." They left my house defeated. No slamming doors this time, just the sound of dragging footsteps and murmurs of despair. I was alone in the dining room. The afternoon sun lit the dust motes dancing in the air. I looked at the black folder, my scepter of power. For years I'd thought power came from love, from giving everything. I was wrong. Power comes from independence, from knowing you can stand on your own 2 feet without emotional crutches that just get in the way. I went to the kitchen and opened a bottle of red wine I'd been saving for a special occasion. I poured a glass and walked out to the back garden. I sat in the wicker chair looking at the roses Don Anselmo had pruned. They looked a little bare now, but I knew they'd bloom back stronger and more beautiful than ever. From the annex, I heard voices arguing. No longer screaming at me, screaming at each other. "I told you to find a job," Vanessa was saying. "You spend too much," Rogelio shot back. They were facing reality. The bubble had burst. I took a sip of wine. It tasted like glory. Like freedom. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out lazily. A bank notification. Attempted transaction $250 at an online gaming store. Declined. Rogelio, in his desperation or denial, was trying to buy digital comfort. I laughed out loud, startling a pair of sparrows in the tree. "Keep trying, my boy," I murmured to the wind. "The game over." I leaned back in the chair, closing my eyes. I felt a peace I hadn't known in decades. I'd cut the umbilical cord that was strangling us both. He would learn to breathe on his own. Or he'd drown. And me, I could finally start living for myself. But I knew this wasn't fully over. A wounded beast is the most dangerous, and they were cornered. Still, for the first time, I wasn't afraid of what they might do. I had the keys, I had the money, and I had the iron will of a woman who survived her own death. Tomorrow would be another day. And I had plans. Big plans, none of which involved supporting parasites. I looked at the horizon where the sun was setting, painting the sky orange and violet. Cheers, Hortensia. I raised my glass to the sky. Welcome to your new life. A click came from the front gate. Someone trying to get in with the old remote. Once, twice, 3 times, then silence. Then the doorbell. I let it ring. Once, twice, 3 times. I finished my wine slowly. They'd learn. In this new administration, appointments are scheduled in advance, and the door only opens for those who bring more than hunger and demands. The transformation was complete. The victim had died in that ambulance, and from her ashes rose the owner of the house. 3 months have passed since the tea revolution, as I call it in my head, and the sound that wakes me in the morning is no longer the silence of an empty house or a video game blasting at full volume. Now, at exactly 6 in the morning, I hear Rogelio's phone alarm cutting through the patio walls. Before that sound would have sent me jumping out of bed to make his coffee, iron his shirt, make sure the kid wasn't late anywhere. Today, I just roll over, fluff my feather pillow, and enjoy that extra half-hour of sleep that retirement gives me. The dynamic in the house has changed radically. The air feels lighter, like we opened every window after years of being sealed shut. My garden, thanks to Don Anselmo's steady hands and my own supervision, has flowered spectacularly. Where there were once boxes of cables and rusty monitors, there's now a small vegetable patch with tomatoes, basil, and peppers. It's funny how the earth responds when you take the garbage off it. Same with life. I got up at 7, put on my silk robe, one I'd saved for special occasions, and now wear daily because every day of freedom is special, and walked to the kitchen. The smell of fresh coffee filled the air, but this time it was just for me. I sat by the big window overlooking the patio to watch the daily show. The annex door opened. Rogelio stepped out. No more flannel pajamas at noon, gray dress pants a little wrinkled because Vanessa still hasn't mastered the iron. A white button-down shirt. He carried a lunchbox. Yes, a lunchbox, because eating out every day is a luxury a level 1 tech support salary can't afford. I watched him walk to the gate. He looked tired. Dark circles, shoulders slightly slumped. But he walked with purpose, no arrogance in his step, just the haste of a man who knows that if he's a minute late, they dock his day. He got a job at a call center for a phone company handling angry customer complaints. The irony is delicious. The man who had no patience to listen to his sick mother now spends 8 hours a day listening to strangers scream at him about slow internet. Life has a very particular sense of humor. Vanessa came out a few minutes later, pulling a folding shopping cart. She no longer went to the fancy gym or brunched with her friends. Now she sold catalog products and made cakes to order. I watched her load cardboard boxes into her small car. They'd traded the new truck for something more economical. Her hair was in a practical ponytail, flat shoes. The society lady had to hang up her heels and get to work. I didn't feel pity. For the first time in years, I felt a faint seed of respect. They were surviving. They were figuring it out. And most importantly, they were doing it without my credit card. That day was the first of the month. Rent day. At 8 that night, the front doorbell rang. Not the kitchen door. That one stayed double locked. I opened the door and found Rogelio, exhausted, tie loosened, ink stains on his fingers. "Good evening, Mom," he said. His voice sounded different, deeper, less whiny. "Good evening, Rogelio. Come in." He came into the foyer but didn't sit. He stood there awkwardly fidgeting with a yellow envelope. "Here," he said, holding it out. "The rent for the annex. Plus the proportional share of electricity and water. Vanessa did the math from the bills you left in the mailbox." I took the envelope. I didn't open it there, didn't count the bills, no need to humiliate him further. But I felt the thickness. Real money. Earned with sweat, not from my savings. "Thank you, son. Would you like a receipt?" I asked, half joking, half serious. Rogelio let out a short, dry laugh. No joy, but none of the old venom either. "No, Mom. Just don't change the locks on me again." He stood there a moment, looking at me. I was wearing makeup, hair done, a nice dress, because I was expecting friends for dinner. he noticed the change. He saw that the haggard, pleading woman was gone. "Hey." He scratched the back of his neck, a gesture he'd kept since childhood. "The job is hard. People are so rude. Sometimes they scream because they can't figure out how to reboot the modem." "I imagine," I said, keeping my distance, but the temperature had dropped a few degrees. "Working with customers takes a lot of patience. That's what I did in the warehouse, with the truck drivers for 35 years. He nodded slowly, like he was processing for the first time that my job wasn't sitting and watching boxes. It was managing daily crises. "Yeah. Well, I just wanted to tell you, the kid got an A in math. I helped him last night. Since we cut the cable, there's no TV." My eyes softened a little. That was the real payoff. "I'm really glad to hear that, Rogelio. Tell him Grandma has a special gift for him this weekend. A book, not a video game." "Yeah, I'll tell him." He turned to leave but stopped with his hand on the doorknob. "Mom, that chamomile tea." I tensed. I thought he was going to throw it in my face again. "Yeah." The other day I had a stomachache from stress. I made myself one. He paused. "It's not so bad." He met my eyes, and I saw a flash of deep, genuine shame in his. "I shouldn't have said that to you that night, I know. It cost me a lot to learn. But I know now. The most expensive lessons are the ones you learn best. Rest, Rogelio. You have to be up early tomorrow." He left, closing the door gently behind him. I stood there, holding the envelope. The satisfaction didn't come from the money. It came from seeing my son finally become a functional man. Not perfect, still a little grumpy and selfish at times, but no longer a parasite. I'd cut the wax wings I'd built for him, and he'd been forced at last to flap his own. I locked the money in my safe. I wasn't spending that on groceries. That money was going straight into an investment fund for my old age, for that Europe trip I'd postponed forever because the kids needed help. Half an hour later, my guests arrived. Carmen, Lucha, and Piedad. My old co-workers from the hardware trade, plus a few neighbors. Loud, joyful women lugging wine bottles and salads. The house filled with laughter. We put on music, those boleros I love. "To Hortensia." Carmen raised her glass. "You look younger than you did 10 years ago. What's your secret, woman? A facelift?" "Something like that." I winked, pouring more wine. "I took about 400 pounds of dead weight off my back. Does wonders for the skin." We laughed until our stomachs hurt. Between stories, I told them how I'd restructured my family business. They listened eyes wide, some taking mental notes for their own do-nothing kids. I realized my story wasn't just mine. It was the story of so many women of our generation who, out of misguided love, raised tyrants. Sitting there at my dining table, eating off my good china, I felt like I'd reclaimed my identity. I was no longer just Rogelio's mom or the widow Martinez. I was Hortensia, the strategist, the friend, the independent woman. The weekend I invited my grandson over for lunch. He came alone, crossing the patio with a smile. He looked different, too, less pale from being indoors, more alert. "Grandma, my dad says I have to take care of my things now because money doesn't grow on trees," he told me while we ate vanilla ice cream in the garden. "Your dad is right, sweetheart, but also remember this money is important. Dignity is more important. Never let anyone treat you like you don't matter, and never treat anyone like they're invisible." The boy nodded with that solemn seriousness of a 7-year-old. "Is that why you locked the door?" he asked, sharp as a tack. "Yes," I smiled. "Sometimes you have to close doors so people learn to knock before entering." Later I saw Vanessa hanging laundry in the back patio. Yes, Vanessa, washing and hanging clothes. She waved at me from across the yard. Not a warm greeting, but it was cordial. The fake friendship was gone, replaced by respectful neighborliness. She knew who held the power now. She knew the will had been changed and the house wouldn't be hers by divine right. That had forced her to look at Rogelio not as a future blank check, but as her partner in the present battle. Oddly enough, they looked more united now fighting the bills together than when they floated in my abundance. That night before bed, I made myself chamomile tea. I sat in my chair and looked at my father's barometer. The needle pointed to fair weather. I thought about the whole journey. The heart attack was terrible. The fear of dying alone was paralyzing. But if I had to live through that stormy night again to reach this moment of peace, I'd do it without hesitation. That pain was the chisel that broke the stone of my inertia. For years, I believed love meant fixing everything. I believed being a good mother meant protecting them from suffering at any cost. But I realized that by shielding them from the cold, I'd stolen their ability to generate their own warmth. By giving them everything I'd taken away, the pride of earning anything. My legacy isn't a fat bank account for them to waste. My legacy is this iron lesson. I'm leaving them the most valuable inheritance of all, the ability to survive. I finished my tea, turned off the living room lights, and walked to my bedroom. I passed the hallway mirror and stopped. The woman looking back at me had white hair and wrinkles around her eyes, but her posture was upright, strong, invincible. I took my suitcase out of the closet and laid it on the bed. Tomorrow I'm leaving with Carmen and Piedad for the beach. A week at an all-inclusive resort, paid for by me. For me. In the distance, I heard the annex lights go off. Silence returned, but it was a fertile silence, full of promise. Rogelio and Vanessa would have to manage a whole week without Grandma next door, without the garden supervisor. And I knew they'd make it. They'd stumble, maybe eat canned tuna 3 days in a row, but they'd survive. And when I came back, tanned and rested, they'd ring the bell to visit me. Not to ask for anything, to tell me how it went. I smiled in the darkness. They told me to have some tea. And boy, did I ever. I drank it down to the dregs, and in the bottom of that bitter cup I read my future, a future where I'm the protagonist, not a supporting actress in my son's life. The storm had passed, the house was in order, and Hortensia was finally in command. I closed my eyes, lulled by the certainty that tomorrow when I woke up, the only alarm would be the sound of the ocean, and the only will I'd obey would be moan.